Before the first story starts, subscribing and hitting the bell is completely free and it genuinely helps this channel keep making these. If you change your mind later, you can always unsubscribe. Okay, turn the lights down. This happened to me on a trip I still do not really like talking about. I was not looking for anything scary. I was just trying to get through one strange night on a coast I did not know. I had been staying in a small place near the water for 3 nights. It was not a resort. It was the kind of place where the hallway lights flickered and everyone told you the beach was safe as long as you stayed near the road. The owner called it an island, but it was more like a strip of land with black water on both sides and old stone paths running through it. During the day, it looked pretty. At night, it felt empty in a way that made you lower your voice. On the second evening, I went out by myself to buy food from a little shop by the dock. It was only supposed to be a 10-minute walk. I had done it already that morning, so I did not think anything of it. By the time I started heading back, the road was almost completely dark. The shop lights were behind me, the guest house lights were somewhere ahead, and the only thing between them was that long path beside the water. About halfway back, I heard someone call my name. Not loudly. Not like they were trying to scare me. Just a normal voice from somewhere off to the right, near the rocks. I stopped because that was the weird part. Nobody there knew my name except the owner and one older woman who cleaned the rooms. And this was not either of their voices. At first, I thought maybe I heard it wrong. Wind can do strange things near water. People talk on phones. Music plays from boats. I told myself all of that in about 2 seconds. Then the voice said my sister's name. That is when my stomach dropped. Not because the name was uncommon, but because of the way it was said. Like someone knew exactly what it meant to me. I did not answer. I just stood there with the plastic bag from the shop cutting into my fingers, trying to understand how a stranger on an empty road could know anything about my family. The voice came again, softer this time. It said I should not be scared. It said there had been an accident near the guest house. It said someone had sent it to find me. That is what made me take one step closer to the rocks. Not because I trusted it, but because when you are alone in a foreign place and someone mentions your family, your brain starts making excuses for them. I asked who was there. No answer. Just the water moving against the stones and that same voice now saying my name again like it was trying to sound patient. I took my phone out. No service. It had been bad the whole trip. But of course this was the moment it decided to show nothing at all. The voice said, "Your friend is hurt. Come here." It was so calm that it almost worked. That was the scary thing. It did not sound angry. It sounded helpful. Then it said another name, my mother's. That was the moment the whole world went quiet. I could hear the bag in my hand. I could hear myself breathing, but everything else felt turned down. I started backing away, slowly at first, because I still had the stupid fear that if I moved too fast, whatever was in the dark would know I knew. Something shifted near the rocks, not footsteps exactly, more like weight moving where weight should not be. I saw a shape lower than a person, then taller than one, like it was standing up wrong. The first thing I noticed was the head. I cannot explain it properly. It was not an animal I knew, and it was not a man. It was something my eyes kept trying to fix and failing. The voice changed after that. It still used my name, but now it sounded closer. Like it had moved without crossing the distance it should have had to cross. It told me to wait, just wait, and for one horrible second it sounded like someone I loved. Not perfect, not exact, but close enough to make my legs hesitate. I ran, I dropped the food, slipped on the sand near the edge of the road, and cut my palm on something sharp when I caught myself. Behind me, the voice did not scream. That is what bothered me later. It did not chase me in some wild, obvious way. It just kept calling names behind me, one after another. It called my sister again, then my mother, then a nickname only my family used when I was little. That one almost made me turn around because it made no sense that anything there could know it. I reached the first street light by the guest house and looked back. The road behind me was empty. The bag from the shop was gone. The rocks were just rocks. When I got inside, the owner was at the desk watching a small television with the sound low. I tried to explain what happened, but the words came out messy. The owner listened until I mentioned the voice knowing family names. Then his face changed. Not dramatic, not movie scared, just tired, like he had heard something he hoped not to hear again. He told me not to go outside again that night. Then he locked the front door and checked the side door twice. I asked him what it was, and he said it was an old local story tourists should not hear. Around 2 a.m, I woke up to crying outside my window. Not loud crying. Quiet, broken crying, like someone was trying not to wake anyone. For a minute I thought it was a woman. Then I heard my own name between the sobs. My name twice, then please, I need help. My room was on the ground floor. The curtains were thin enough that the moonlight made the window look blue. I did not move. I just stared at the glass and tried not to breathe too loud. The crying stopped. Then the voice said my sister's name again, but this time it said it from directly under the window. I knew I should not look. Every part of me knew that. But when someone says a name you love from the other side of a window at 2 a.m, your body does not act normal. I moved just enough to see the bottom corner of the glass. There was something crouched outside. I could not see all of it. Just one shoulder, part of the head, and a hand pressed against the wall. The hand was too long. That was the detail I kept repeating later. Not claws exactly. Just too long. Like the fingers were made for holding onto stone. It whispered my name again. Then it said, "Open the door. Your mother is here." I put both hands over my mouth because I almost made a sound. Then the voice changed again. It sounded like the hotel owner. It said, "Please open. There is a problem downstairs." That was when I understood it was not just repeating names. It was trying voices. It was testing doors in my head until one opened. The crying came back after that, soft at first, then louder, then angry for half a second before it turned gentle again. I stayed on the bed until sunrise with the blanket pulled up to my chin and my phone in my hand, even though it still had no service. In the morning, the owner found marks under my window. He did not let me take pictures. He just poured water over the wall and told me to pack. He drove me back to the ferry himself. On the way, he finally told me the name he knew. Donestre. The real medieval source places the Donestre in the wonders of the East. It is described as a creature that knows human speech, uses false words, and calls travelers by familiar names. I asked him if that was what people called the thing on the island. He said people had different names for it, but the old description was close enough to make his hands shake on the steering wheel. He said the worst mistake was answering. Not looking, not hearing it, answering. Because once you answer, it knows which voice worked. I asked how it knew my family's names. The owner did not answer for a long time. Then he said maybe it does not know them until you think of them. I do not know if that was superstition or something he actually believed. I only know I heard names. No one there should have known. At the ferry dock, there were people everywhere. Workers, tourists, drivers, kids with backpacks. Normal morning noise. I had never been so happy to hear strangers talking. Just before I boarded, I heard crying again. It came from behind the row of parked scooters, low enough that no one else seemed to notice. I did not look. I kept walking. Then the crying stopped, and a voice behind me said my nickname one more time. I got on the ferry and did not sit by the window. I did not turn around when the boat pulled away. I watched the floor until the island was gone. The thing that scares me most is not the shape outside the window. It is that for half a second every time it spoke, some part of me wanted to believe it. Because that is how the Donestre works. It does not start with teeth. It starts with something familiar. A name, a voice, a person you miss. The old story says it eats the traveler and leaves the head, then sits and weeps over it. I never saw that part, and I am alive because I never opened the door. This version is told as a dramatized first-person horror story. The Donestre speech, false words, familiar names and weeping come from the medieval source tradition. The Donestre appears in the Old English Wonders of the East, a strange medieval text about distant places and monstrous beings at the edge of the known world. Modern scholarship describes the Donestre as fearsome, lying, psychic, and person-eating. That is why this forgotten monster feels so close to modern voice mimic horror. So, if you ever hear your name somewhere it should not be known, do not answer right away. Sometimes the scariest thing in the dark is not a scream, it is a familiar voice. The second story happened a few months after the island. I did not tell many people about it because it sounds like I went looking for the same thing twice. I did not. It found me somewhere else. I was driving through a rural area late at night, the kind of place where the road is just one black line between trees. I had been filming old churches and abandoned cemeteries for background footage. I stopped near a little bus shelter because my phone said there was an inn about 10 minutes away, and I wanted to check the directions before I lost service again. It was cold enough that I could see my breath when I stepped out of the car. There were no houses nearby, no other headlights, just the buzzing light over the shelter and the trees behind it. Then I heard a man cough from inside the woods, not far in, maybe 20 feet from the road. I froze because it sounded so normal. Like someone trying politely to get my attention. He said, "Excuse me," that was all, 2 words. I almost answered automatically, because when someone sounds hurt or lost, you do not think monster, you think person. I lifted my phone light toward the trees. The beam hit branches, wet leaves, and nothing else. I asked if someone needed help. I know that was stupid, I know. The words went quiet for maybe 5 seconds. Then the voice came back, and this time it said my name. It did not shout it. It said it the way someone says your name when they are standing right beside you and do not want to scare you. I backed up until my hip hit the car. My phone still had 1 bar, so I tried to call the inn. The call failed before it even rang. The voice changed. It sounded like the woman from the last gas station, the one who had sold me coffee 20 minutes earlier. It said, "Roads closed ahead, sweetheart." That was worse than my name, because now I knew it had heard someone, or copied someone. Or maybe it had been near the gas station the whole time. I looked down and saw prints in the mud by the road. Not shoe prints. Hooves. But the spacing was wrong, like whatever made them had stopped and stood there watching me. Something moved behind the first row of trees. It was too low at first, then too high, like an animal trying to remember how a person is supposed to stand. I saw the mouth before I understood the body. A pale line opened sideways in the dark, wider than any animal's mouth should open. There were not rows of teeth, there was one hard white ridge, like a single piece of bone had been set into the jaw from one side to the other. Later, I found out that this detail is part of the old description. The Leucrota is said to have 1 continuous bone instead of normal teeth. The old writers make it sound impossible, part donkey or stag, part lion, cloven hooves, an ear-to-ear mouth, and a body that feels assembled from animals that should never fit together. In the trees it did not look like a clean illustration. It looked like the woods had made a bad copy of an animal from a book. Then it spoke in my own voice. That is the part I still hate saying out loud. It said, "I'm okay, just come here." Hearing your voice from somewhere else does something to your head. For half a second I felt like I was the one in the woods, and the person by the car was the copy. I got into the car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the keys between the seat and the console. The thing did not come into the road, it stayed behind the trees, moving parallel to the car. I could see one reflection, then another, low and pale between branches. Then it used a child's voice, just one sentence. "Please, my dad is hurt." I hated how fast my hand went to the door handle. I actually touched it. That is what scares me. A part of me still wanted to check. I pulled my hand back and started the car. The engine sounded too loud in the quiet. The trees stayed black, but the voice kept talking. It said names I did not know. Then names I did, then little half sentences in voices I recognized from places I had passed that day. A truck driver from the diner, the gas station woman, a man I had asked for directions. It was like the whole day had been collected and stored in the trees. That is why the old Leucrota stories are so disturbing. Medieval bestiary preserves the tradition and it produces human voices. Other Leucrota traditions say it calls people by name at night. I drove to the inn without stopping. I kept checking the mirror, but there was no animal behind me. No person, just the road disappearing into darkness. My room was on the second floor, facing the woods. The woman at the desk told me not to leave food outside because stray dogs sometimes came out from the trees. I wanted to tell her there was something worse than a dog out there, but I did not. I had learned by then that saying these things out loud makes you sound like the problem. Around 3 in the morning I woke up to knocking, not on the door, on the window. I was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no tree close enough to climb. Still, something tapped the glass 3 times, very lightly. Then my phone rang. The screen said unknown number. I did not answer it, but the voicemail played anyway through the speaker. It was my own voice again. Quiet, breathless, it said, "Please open the window. I am outside." I threw the phone across the bed. The knocking stopped. For a minute, there was only the room heater clicking and the sound of wind pressing against the glass. Then, from the trees below, several voices started talking at once. Not loud, not screaming, just murmuring, like people waiting in a line. One voice laughed, like the gas station woman. One coughed, like the man from the woods. One whispered my name over and over until it sounded less like a name and more like a hook. The next morning, I found the old cemetery behind the inn. It was not on the map. A little iron gate, a path through dead grass, and stones so worn down they looked blank. The gate chain was hanging open. The mud around it had the same hoof marks I had seen by the road. Near the back fence, one patch of soil was disturbed. I'm not saying I saw anything dug up. I did not, but the ground looked fresh in a place where nothing else was fresh. Some Leucrota traditions connect the creature with corpses and graves. I do not know what was under that soil. I only know the air around it smelled wrong. When I got home, I started searching the old name Nina gave me, Leucrota, Leucrota, Leucrota. Different spelling, same awful idea. The descriptions are strange enough to feel fake until you realize how specific they are. The huge mouth, the single bone, the hybrid body, the human voice. That is what I saw between the trees, not clearly, not like a movie monster standing under a spotlight, just enough for my brain to know the shape was wrong. For weeks after that, I could not answer unknown calls. If someone knocked while I was asleep, I would wake up already halfway out of bed, reaching for a lock. The worst part is that sometimes the memory does not come back as an image. It comes back as sound. A cough in another room. Someone saying "excuse me" behind me. And over time, some stupid human part of me still wants to turn around. That is why the Leucrota scares me more than something that only growls. A growl tells you to run. A human voice asks you to help. The old stories understood that. The mouth is monstrous, but the voice is the trap. By the time you see what is speaking, you are already too close. I thought leaving Mactown would end it. I checked out before sunrise, drove 2 hours without music and kept the windows up even though the car smelled like cold coffee and rain. At the first rest stop, I parked under a camera and sat there until other people arrived. I remember thinking that if something copied me now, at least someone else would hear the difference. Then a notification popped up on my phone. 1 new audio file, no sender, no number, just a grey file icon with today's date on it. I did not play it. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then I deleted it. The phone vibrated again before my thumb left the glass. The file came back with a different name. This time it was called outside.wav. I know what you want to hear. You want me to say I threw the phone away, changed numbers, and never listened. I wish I could say that. I played 1 second, less than 1 second. It was night air, leaves moving, and then my mother's voice asking why I was ignoring her. My mother was alive, she was home. She had not called me, but that voice had the tired little break she gets when she is trying not to sound worried. That is what finally made me understand it was not only copying sounds, it was copying trust. It was finding the voice that would make my hand move before my brain could stop it. So now, when people tell me monsters are easy to spot, I think about that file sitting on my phone. A blank icon, a normal name, a voice I loved, coming from somewhere it should never be. So, if you ever hear someone call your name from the trees at night, do not answer, do not explain yourself, do not check. Let the woods keep talking to itself. Because whatever is out there does not need to sound real forever. It only needs to sound real long enough for you to step off the road. If these 2 stories kept you here until the end, subscribing and ringing the bell is free, and it helps the channel more than you know. And if it is not for you, you can unsubscribe anytime. Thank you for listening. Sleep well.